Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's such an honor to share my story with you. So, in college, I was your typical overextended environmental activist. Climate disruption was everywhere, so I had to be too. I worked on clean energy, for green jobs, for a better farm bill, you name it, dashing around from cause to cause with a fickleness that made Speedy Gonzales look like regular Gonzales. So the battle I was fighting this one week was against a proposed coal-fired power plant near the mouth of the Columbia River. The Republican at Whitman College, Kurt, approached me one day at a cafeteria about an editorial I'd written in the student newspaper. "Camila, what's the end game here?" he asked me conservatively. What do you mean end game? "Well, you know, if you block this plant, they're just gonna build it somewhere else, right?" "No," I responded, patiently and in plain English, "because everyone everywhere has to rise up and block all coal-fired power plants in their tracks. We have no choice." Duh. So anyhow, I definitively ended the debate forever. Maybe Kurt was trying to get me to think a little bigger. I don't know. I thought he was a troll just looking for attention, and I didn't want to play. But if I had chosen to engage him, it would have been a threat. Because, you see, to fight was my identity. I wasn't looking for an end to the fight. So Kurt asked me some silly questions, and I continued to kick ass and win some medals here and, land some cool jobs there, until one day, in the summer of 2012, when my whole identity came into question, and I realized that I wanted to do my work differently. That morning in July, I got up as usual, but in the mirror saw a piece of scalp where it shouldn't be. And as I peered closer, clumps of hair fell into the sink. That morning, I realized that nothing would be the same. Just a few weeks later, I started to really panic, though. I looked into the mirror again and saw that my eyelashes and eyebrows were starting to go as well. So, in a panic, I phoned when sick to work and locked eyes with myself in the bathroom mirror. With one hand, I covered my fading eyebrows, and with another, I covered my hair, just to get used to the self that I was going to become. And the strangest thing happened as I stared into the mirror. I saw right through my skin to a skull looking back at me. I'm not telling you about a skull for melodrama. It's just that I actually saw my physical, deconstructed, impermanent self in a way that I hadn't before. I was suddenly mortal. What I have is an inflammatory disorder called alopecia, where you randomly, unpredictably, and sometimes forever lose your hair. Its cure is not known because the cause is not well understood. And you can see that, yeah, with the help of a naturopath and a whole lot of luck, I look okay today, but for that year and a half, I wasn't sure what was happening, and I was so scared in those beginning days. You see, to lose my hair was to lose my power. It's difficult to describe the panic I felt watching my youth starting to fade away in a matter of weeks. I hadn't realized how much my confidence as a professional depended on my cute and peppy persona. And I know, I'm the cutest organizer you ever saw. But really, seriously, I was just a cheerleader for whatever fight was most popular at the moment. I wasn't on the chalkboard drawing out the strategy. And now without hair, what kind of an organizer was I going to be? I mean, how soon until some younger, healthier climateer stole my pom-poms? And what was I going to do with the time that I had left? In a way, my story is not different from anyone else's. It's just I was on a slightly accelerated timeline. So I thought back to Kurt. I realized I wasn't concerned with his end game, because it wasn't in my interest that the world's problems would end. Problems served me like my hair did. They made me feel important and wanted and needed, like a hero. Alopecia freed me from that delusion. I had been trapped, as so many of us are, obsessing over our problems. They call it, I've heard, the pathology of problem worship. And as it went down the drain, I found myself back where I'd started, with a deep love for the natural world, a world that demands a satisfactory endgame. And so I committed to finding a root solution to the symptoms that ailed it. True love refuses to manage symptoms. When I got my prognosis, I resigned myself immediately to painting on my eyebrows and wearing a wig for the rest of my life. But the people in my life who loved me kept looking for a cure. They didn't give up. My dad queried random doctors he met on planes. My mom said, "Why don't you meditate?" And my sister called up naturopaths she knew. My boyfriend started juicing anti-inflammatory root vegetables for me every day. I was so fortunate to have people in my life who kept looking and looking for the root solution because they loved me. The planet needs that love too, and you are the people to give it. Buckminster Fuller once said that a problem adequately stated is a problem very nearly solved. Our wigs and eyebrow pencils for the climate haven't healed it because we haven't adequately stated the problem. We haven't diagnosed the real disease. You see, climate change itself is not the problem, but one of the costs, the hidden costs, of cheap fossil fuels. Climate change is just a symptom. And the other symptoms you've heard of tonight: ocean acidification, species loss, refugees, crop failures, pipelines. We will address the cause of these symptoms the moment that the most profitable industry on earth pays the full price for the commodity that it extracts at the moment it extracts it from the ground. Not by fighting every pipeline or putting bricks in the back of our toilets. A price on carbon can create the conditions for the health that we know is possible. That's why I'm so excited to see real climate doctors in the audience tonight. I've seen Christina and Fletcher here at PSU who are working hard for a carbon tax in Oregon, and Laura and Tamara with the Citizens Climate Lobby doing the same at the national level. And I see all of you here, so many of whom I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, but I know that what you have to offer is essential for a movement that wins climate stability. The International Energy Agency reports that we have 2 years only until 2017 to pull out of massive investments in fossil fuels that lock us in past that 2°C temperature rise that most governments on Earth agree would be catastrophic. Just as the world's climatologists have come to a consensus about the effects fossil fuels have when we burn them, so too the world's energy economists have reached a consensus that the way to keep fossil fuels underground is to make the people who extract them for huge profits pay the full price for the costs that we instead are bearing in our lives, in our families, in our communities, our futures, our planet. All the solar panels and wind turbines and recycling programs in the world are not going to convince the Koch brothers to just let those tar sands be. It's time for us to muster the goodwill here in this room, in our movement, to focus with discipline on the root of the problem. I found that goodwill, like the love that my family showed me in my hour of need, through art activism. Last year, in February, I was part of a group that organized hundreds of students, teachers, retirees, and other concerned Oregonians to create a 120-foot-long mosaic of a salmon made from 1,500 individual pieces of art, each contributed by someone in the Rogue Valley expressing their love for home. We migrated the salmon upstream, north to Salem, where with 200 other Oregonians from across the state, we lobbied our legislators for a revenue-neutral carbon tax. And we were so excited to hear from our local rep that our effort was instrumental to passing appropriations for further study of that carbon tax in Oregon. The salmon was metaphorically and actually bigger than the sum of its parts. It was like a sand mandala that spawned stronger activists and then dissolved in the Oregon rain. The salmon opened my eyes to the power, the ancient power of art activism, to create a community founded on our shared concerns that can bypass the pathology of problem worship and strengthen our resolve to work for a solution. Winning a fair and effective price on carbon will not be easy. Luckily, our movement is enormous. Over 70% of Americans are ready for government action on climate change. All we need to do, instead of despairing about the fossil fuel industry's successes, is take the first tip from their playbook. It's a simple tip. One goal. Their goal is profit. Our goal is doing what is necessary to save the planet we love. I believe that it was my ego, my sense of self-importance, that kept me from fully embracing a solution so much larger than myself. And alopecia helped me get myself out of the way for a moment to wake up and look around. But we no longer have the luxury of that time, of recruiting more soldiers by letting them fight any old battle. I want to recruit you to love the solution instead through the power of art. I'm working on 2 exciting projects that I hope you'll get involved in. One is called Coal, Fable of the Fire Rock. And it's a totally scalable, adaptable musical fable anyone can produce anywhere about a family facing the paradox of fossil fuels. It's meant to spark solution conversations, and I want it to happen big time in Portland. We're looking for hosts, for sponsors, for audiences, so please come find me after. The next project I'm so jazzed about is happening here close to home. And it's a new grassroots network called Oregon Can, that is singularly focused on winning a carbon tax here in Oregon in 2015, next year. And we need your support. We need organizers. Please come find me. There's a sign-up sheet back at the Climate Solutions table. You can put down your name and your address so we can stay in touch. Thoreau said that there are 1,000 striking at the branches of evil to one who strikes at the root. Cutting trees aside, I believe that our love for the planet and for each other, for the person sitting next to you and for your family at home, and for the family that you want to have someday, I believe that your love and my love compels us to reach and dig deep, deep down for the root disease and cure it. That's why we're so lucky to know already what the best, first, sharpest tool in our toolbox is for this operation of health, and it's a carbon tax. It won't be easy, but love never gives up. I'm not giving up, and I know that you aren't either. Let's love this planet to health. Thank you.